Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I'll interview Jordan Furlong, who's a leading legal analyst and forecaster who keynoted at LawDroid's first annual AI conference. Jordan will share the impact that he thinks AI will have on the legal profession, how we can best prepare for it, and use it to our advantage. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. My name is Tom Martin. I'll be your host, and I'm thrilled to have my guest for today, Jordan Furlong, who is the keynote speaker at LawDroid's first AI conference back in January. Jordan, pleasure to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Jordan, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little background about what you do, who you work with, and what you consider your role to be.
The way I tend to describe myself, for lack of any better nouns that have come to the fore, is a legal market analyst, forecaster, consultant. I work with any number of stakeholders within the legal sector. That tends to mostly be law firms of all sizes and jurisdictions. But I've also done consulting work with law societies here in Canada and law schools, all sorts of different associations, organizations, mostly here in Canada and in the US, but also some elsewhere, Europe, Australia, a few other places as well. And the common denominator for me really has been wanting to approach people in this area, particularly lawyers, to communicate to them my very strongly held perspective. And this has been, I have felt this way since well before we had to, we had the run in with the pandemic and the run in with, and everything is happening with AI, is that everything's going to change, folks. It's going to change really fast. And one of the reasons it's going to change is that what we've got right now is not sustainable. It is not, as a sector, as a legal services system, as a marketplace, as an element of a functional democratic system, the legal services system is just not working, or it's not working properly as well as it should. And it's not serving people, it's not serving clients, it's not serving lawyers. It's not clear to me who it's serving. So we need to anticipate a different set of circumstances, a different context, and then do what we can to make those adjustments as soon as we can. And that, generally speaking, has been, along with my recommendations on how they should do that, that's kind of been fairly consistently my message for about 15 plus years now.
You have a website, right? law21.ca. That's where most people can follow up with you and learn more about what you have to say.
Yeah, it's a good headquarters. Most of my active writing right now is at my Substack newsletter under my own name as well, and I'm optimistically, stubbornly still active on Twitter. But Law21 is a good place to go to sort of. It's kind of a good starter kit for what I'm doing. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your professional journey that brought you to focus on the intersection of law and technology. How did that come about? What was some of the stuff you did before that?
Oh, how did it come about? Largely accidentally and very fortunately. I graduated law school in '93, articled at a Bay Street law firm, where they very helpfully, after a year, sort of said, "You're not really cut out for this." And they were, I think, quite right to say so. And so I kind of wandered around for a little bit and found myself eventually working for a series of legal periodicals, the Lawyers Weekly, National Magazine, Canadian Corporate Counsel Association, and I served as editor of those periodicals for a space of about 13 years or so. And it was during that time that I kind of shifted my interest away from the law, the court, the cases and the legislation and all that kind of stuff, and kind of looked a little bit more at the sector itself, the market for the services, the deliverables, the access, all those issues. And that's where I first kind of came to notice this is really not working well for hardly anybody. And this being kind of the mid to late 2000s, I began blogging, because that was a thing you did back then, and just writing about these sorts of issues. And I did some of it at slaw.ca and then at my own website, Law21. And that was really gratifying. I was glad for the chance to do it. And people would sort of call me up and say, "Hey, that was interesting. Would you mind coming to our event and talking about these sorts of issues?" And I said, Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. I'd love to. And they say, that's great. How much do you charge for that? And I said, well, okay, now suddenly this is a thing I didn't know actually was a possibility. So a lot of what I spent the 2010s doing was a lot of that speaking work, going to law firms, legal organizations, law schools, law societies, a whole bunch of different places and countries, and just sort of trying to spread that message as best I could. And that came to a screeching halt with the pandemic because nobody was traveling and no one was getting together and so forth. So I switched at that point to doing some more consulting work with law societies and did a couple of reports for the BC and Alberta law societies about lawyer licensure and competence. So it's really kind of been all over the place, and there's been no particular direction or destination in mind. But to circle back to the question you asked me some time ago, what brought me to the intersection of law and technology? What has always interested me about technology, and I am not a tech guy at all, like not remotely. So I saw technology. Yes, obviously it's a tool for getting things done and for accomplishing stuff. But in the law, especially, technology is also a bit of a canary in the coal mine because when you look at all the various technologies and tools that are available to lawyers and law firms and how few of them have ever been implemented and how few of them have actually made an impact. And I was like, why is that? Right? Doctors, when there's a new surgical technique or a new scope of some kind, they will embrace it. They'll say, hey, here's something we can use to do our jobs better. Why isn't this the case with lawyers and law firms? So for me, and there's lots of reasons for that, which we can talk about if you like. But for me, technology is useful only insofar as this is something we can use to do our jobs better, to have more effective outcomes for our clients, to be done with our own work faster so that we can go out and go for a walk or see our kids or do other things that life would suggest that we consider doing. Um, and the fact that we have struggled with it speaks to our culture, speaks to our training, and speaks to a lot of the incentives built into our business model. So for me, that's kind of it's not interesting to me so much for what it is itself, but for what it reveals, I think, about us as a profession.
Was there anything in particular, though, that along that journey
Mhm.
got you to focus on the technology part of it?
Mm.
Was it just that that you were interested in that, or was it more of like it created more of a complex interaction between lawyers and how they do their job, or what, or
Yeah,
was it just market demand that people were asking for it?
well, yeah, that's the kind of funny part is that people will sort of well, people even before AI, right, were contacting me saying, "Hey, can you come and talk about all the impact of the latest technologies?" And it's like, I can find you 10 people in this country alone who can do a better job of that than I can. Right. And one of the keys to being successful, as you know, is figure out what you're really good at and focus as much as you can on that. And if it's peripheral to your interests or your expertise, get someone else on the job for you. So for me, yeah, I mean, technology is it's instrumentalist, it's catalytic, it's revelatory, and it's really important as being, I guess for me, the one function that technology has to offer us as lawyers that I really wish we would take up and we would take up ages ago is its force multiplier aspect. You can get so much more done, so much more quickly, so much more easily if you embrace the use of technology. And this is not a secret delivered from on high in stone tablets. This is screamingly obvious. So yeah, I mean, so part of my presentations and my message to lawyers has been, you should be using this tool. But when they don't, then I say, okay, now we got to look behind. What is it about the way you run your business? What is it the way in which you approach your work and approach your relationship with clients that builds up this level of resistance where you're not delivering? You could be doing so much more than you are. Why aren't you? It's like, what are the issues going on here, guys? It's crazy to me.
Were there any mentors along the way that kind of, amplified this
Mm,
focus?
yeah.
I read your book, and I know that
Oh,
Richard Susskind, for example, was
mhm.
one who wrote a review on there. Were you influenced at all by his work?
Oh, 100%. No, Richard, both in terms of the example he set, in terms of the work that he was doing, and the message that he was sending, and the impact that he was having. Very inspirational to me. I very much suspect that if Richard hadn't had the career that he has had and is having, I wouldn't be sitting here chatting with you today. So as an example, as an inspiration, no question, but also as an individual, I've been very fortunate to interact with him several times. He's always been very encouraging, about the work that I'm doing. We are not completely ad item in terms of our views on the market, but that's fine. I wouldn't expect that we would be. So he's been very inspirational that way. And I think the other big thing for me was, and this kind of goes back to my time when I was still working with the national magazine at the CBA. One of the things that one of the perks of the job was you got to go to Chicago to attend the ABA Tech Show. And especially during that time, Canada had a number of pioneering legal technology practice management people, Dan Pennington in Toronto, Dave Belinsky in Vancouver, Simon Chester in Toronto. And if I keep naming names, I'll eventually, name someone I forget. And I had a chance to meet them, as well as many very influential people in the US, Dennis Kennedy and Matt Holman and Ron Friedman and all these folks, Carolyn Elephant. And that really was instrumental. So it's funny, I got a call the other day from a brand new reporter at the ABA Journal. She was saying, yeah, I'm about to go to my first tech show. I said, awesome, go, meet people, talk to people. It's an amazing community. And I think that still applies to the larger legal innovation community. It's much bigger now than it was, much more diverse than it was, which is terrific. But one of the things I try to do as much as I can is give back in that regard, and to be a resource for people as well who are coming into this community that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a tight community, and one that I think, really builds on itself, especially at events like Tech Show. You get to connect when mostly you're on Twitter, just speaking virtually to each other, and those connections are really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
I hope you don't mind me asking, but you did mention that there were some things with Professor Susskind that you didn't agree on. What would be one of those things?
Yeah, I think one of the and again, this I think probably goes not less to a disagreement on the merits and more in terms of focus and expertise, because Richard's background, of course, is heavily into technology. I mean, he was an AI pioneer back when none of us knew exactly what that meant. And he was writing books on AI when I was applying to work for legal newspapers. So, he has, of course, forgotten more than I've ever learned in this area. And I think Richard has always been and continues to be a very strong believer and proponent of technology as a transformative force. And I recognize the potential for technology in that way, but I have found myself drawn more to market factors, to cultural factors, to institutional factors, human factors, I guess, to explain not only how we've found ourselves in the mess that we're in, but also how we can clamber out of it as well. So again, it's not that I think we see the problem in the solutions a very similar fashion, but I think we stand in two different places, such that we see different facets, and we have we sort of see different pathways towards the same goal. And I think that would apply to a whole bunch of people in the area. Like I said before, it's a much broader field, a more diverse field, a much more populous field than it used to be. And there's a lot of chaotic overlapping of views, and violent agreement, and maybe sometimes not quite agreement. But this is why I refer to everybody in this area as fellow travelers, because we're all heading towards the same destination. We all want the same thing, which is a legal system, a legal market that makes people, delivers better outcomes for people, makes people happier, including the lawyers who are involved with it, including the other professionals and people who are involved with this. That is the goal that we all share. And we just have different ways of getting there, which is great. Multiple roads lead all the way to Rome.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, also that our viewpoints are informed by our life experience. And so if he came from AI, then naturally a more of a tech focus would be there. So let me ask you a few questions that are kind of follow-ups to the keynote presentation that you gave at
Sure.
the
Yeah, yeah.
conference. Um, One of them had to do with, you had mentioned in your keynote that AI has not seen yet a widespread adoption within the legal profession.
Mhm.
What do you think are some of the barriers to why that
Mm.
is not happening?
Yeah. And and I don't think it has experienced widespread adoption within the profession. That being said, for something that was not out in the public domain a year ago right now, I think it actually has made remarkable progress and remarkable inroads within the practicing bar and within the profession more broadly. So, I mean, compared to other types of technology, everything short of Google, I think, has does not compare to the ease with which lawyers have embraced the opportunity. That being said, it's nowhere close to a critical mass of lawyers or legal professionals in this regard. I still routinely come across lawyers who say, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. Wasn't there some guy in New York who like got in trouble because he put a fake case into the court?" Yeah, that's the AI thing, isn't it? Which, and so that speaks a part of it too. To the extent a number of lawyers have heard about this, they have heard about literally the worst case scenario from a
Right.
lawyer's point of view, which is that, oh my God, you are literally on the front page of the New York Times for your incompetence. So I think the fact that lawyers are hardworking people who have a lot of pressures and a lot of demands and don't have the time to put their head up and look around and see what's going on, plus the fact that bad news travels faster than good news, and I guess finally, the fact that a lot of lawyers, if you're working in a law firm, there's probably all kinds of rules about you can't use this, you can't use that. I mean, there's some people who can't even access Facebook from their firms, whatever. So I think there's a lot of in the kind of factors you would think would play into this point. That having been said, and you can probably speak to this as well. I have not come across any lawyer so far. I mean, small sample size, fine, and it's a very biased sample maker. I haven't come across any lawyer so far who said, "Yeah, I used generative AI, and it wasn't much of it. It couldn't really do much. Wasn't that interesting? I didn't think it was cool at all." Right? It's not the experience. People say this is freaky. This is amazing what it can do, and the more you play with it, the more you see what it can do. Right? And that's not to say that lawyers aren't obviously aware of the dangers and the pitfalls that are involved with something like this. But the more that you are exposed to what generative AI can do, not just in terms of text, but in terms of imagery and photography and who knows what else is going on out there, which I'm kind of afraid to think of, the more you see what it can do, the more your imagination should be captured by it and say, wow, what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And I think I'd like to think we are still at that discovery stage as a profession. And I am reasonably confident we will pass through the adoption curve here a lot faster than we did for almost any other technology.
Well, 100% that we're at the discovery phase of all this. I will say though that some lawyers do have that meh kind of reaction. But
Mm-hmm.
what I found when I dig a little deeper is that, the prompting that they put to the test is really minimal. So
Mm-hmm.
if you put very little effort into what you're asking AI to do, you're going to get very little effort back. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty
Oh,
much.
yeah. Oh, well, I did a piece on my Substack a few months back talking about how the critical skill for using generative AI is prompting, which is the same thing as instructing, right? How well do you instruct a junior? If you call a junior into your office and say, find out, create something of X and Y and Z and go, right? And they're like, what? Give me some context. Give me some background. What's going on, right? So, generative AI can do a whole bunch of things that cannot read your mind. So it does take some time and patience to work with it. And I guess if you're just used to banging in words in Google and letting autocorrect figure out what you're talking about, sure, it takes more than a moment's effort. It doesn't take that much more. So if you truly are, as a lawyer, too lazy to form an actual sentence, a question, to put something into the bar, then okay, that's great. Godspeed. But the people who are more inclined to construct a query like a grown-up are going to be a lot more successful than you are in this regard.
Another follow-up on the keynote was that you said that AI had the potential to open the floodgates for legal access.
Mhm.
And what are some ways that you think it could do
Mm.
that?
Yeah, it's funny, yeah, because because I did use the term "open the floodgates," and actually, while I was giving the presentation, I thought to myself, for your average lawyer watching this, that's probably a negative image. I probably should have chosen something a bit different, right? Because when we say open the floodgates, we often sort of say, oh no, here comes a flood. Here comes like, millions of volumes of water to crush and drown us all. And it's like, okay, that wasn't actually what I meant. Maybe it's almost like we want to raise the barriers to the playing field and let more people get into the park and play, might be a better way to phrase it. Because one of the things, and I've thought this even before generative AI, but AI does, I think, provide us with a perfect illustration of this. I have felt that even within this community of legal innovation and the conversations we're having now, which are much more voluminous than they used to be, we still focus way too much on the supply side of the market. We're talking about lawyers and maybe possibly paraprofessionals or court navigators or people who we can somehow convince the regulators to let them be providers of services. And we can have an entire conversation about the massive bottleneck in supply that we have because we have one. But we need to spend a lot more time talking about the demand side, right? Because again, we know 80, 85, 90% of all legal demand, when you consider it as the total universe of law related life and business problems that people have in this world of ours, then, and you realize that only a very, very, very small fraction, 15% maybe, ever get dealt with by a lawyer, then you realize, okay, that's fine. It's great that we're lowering the ceiling of supply to an extent. Wonderful. But let's raise the floor. Let's give them information. Let's give them empowerment. Let's give them options and opportunities to do stuff, to know more and to do more and to act more on their own so that they can solve their problem themselves. Because I'll tell you, Tom, this is one of the things I wrote this in I mentioned this today in my this morning's newsletter, talking about regulators and this idea of protect the public. And we can have another conversation about that. But one of the things I dislike about that is it just is so patronizing. The public must be protected because they're like children, because they don't know what's good for them, because they're naive and foolish. And we're here to protect you, public, and take care of you. And it's like, they're grown-ups and it's well into the 21st century, and let's start treating people like adults and let them make their own decisions. I'm not saying remove the safeguards, I'm not saying any of that, but I'm saying this idea that our job as regulators is all about protecting the poor helpless public, we have got to lose that idea. Let's empower them so that they are in a better position to make decisions and in a better position to know the right thing to do, right? And if that chops a few billable hours off the collective output of the legal profession, I personally can live with that because I think it's definitely worthwhile doing.
I completely agree with you, which is probably predictable.
Yeah.
But that people should be allowed to make their own market choices about what kind of representation or just legal information that they want.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be making those choices for them. So
Yeah. But give them information so they can make informed choices, and don't charge them to give them the information. That to me is public policy 101. But yeah.
and one thing I point out to our either watchers or listeners here is that you wrote a book about the demand side, which is law as a buyer's market, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. 20, I wrote most of it in 2016 and published it in 2017. I called it Law as a Buyer's Market. That was kind of an aspirational title, I will be completely honest with you, because that felt to me where we were going and that we'd be there very soon. We are further towards that goal today, that law is a buyer's market for services, but we are not remotely there anymore at this stage. But the aspiration still continues. Law should be a buyer's market. All markets, to my mind, should be buyer's markets, because that's the point of a market is that buyers can get what they need. Again, one of Richard's favorite sayings is, the point of the law is not to provide a living for lawyers. The point of the law is so that people can get solutions to their problems, can take advantage of opportunities, can navigate their way through the fact that life is really difficult and challenging sometimes, and it's not easy out there, and you need some help in that regard. So yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, we talk about maybe outside the confines of our conversation today about the lawyer preparation and formation process. And I wish we would take more time within law school, within bar admission, to drive this point home. You are here to help. You are here to serve. And if you're not helping and you're not serving, go back, do not pass go, figure out what you're doing wrong, and start over again.
And that segues well into a follow-up question I have about the keynote, which is you had also mentioned about AI's impact on the creation of new lawyers or young associates and their training.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you anticipate the impact of AI is going to be on that?
It's tough to say in a way because there are so many different directions this could go at this point. Partly because, again, we don't know yet what generative AI in its textual form anyway, again, setting aside the other aspects of it, the large language model, we don't yet know what it's fully capable of. I guess on a scale of from 0 to 100, we're not going to get either one of those. Well, we don't know where in the middle we're going to land, or if it's in the middle at all, if it's slanted one way or the other. Okay. One of the many problems with our lawyer formation preparation process is that as a lawyer, you arrive in the profession and you have not had any exposure to what it's actually like to do the thing you're going to do. As if a surgeon enters the hospital having never cut into a patient before, and again, in the year of our Lord 2024, we are still saying this about the law is madness. Right? So many people who say, I didn't even draft a contract in law school. I didn't even see one, right? So one of the things that generative AI, I think, is good at, or can be good at, is and this is just one small aspect of it, as a role-playing aid. Right? I've even done this myself just for fun. I sat with ChatGPT and I said, I'm a lawyer who wants to get better at client service. I want you to pretend to be a client who's coming into my office. This is my practice area. Here are the basic details of the client situation. And here, by the way, are some links to websites that talk about what constitutes great client service. I want you and I to have a dialogue for about 10 things back and forth. And at the end, you tell me how I did. And it was terrific. And he said, yeah, this was good, but you were misleading on this, and that wasn't helpful, et cetera, right? Now, would it be better if a lawyer had access to, I don't know, a human being, a practicing lawyer who could provide this kind of feedback for them as part of our development process? Yes, it would be. And maybe you go back 80, 90 years, the profession was small enough that we could actually do that, but we don't have that now. But this is a simple, easy, cost-free way to give you that bit of that sense. Here in Ontario with the law practice program and with the CPLED prep program in Alberta, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, part of what they do involves essentially a simulated law firm where you are virtually being taken through the process. It's fantastic. It is world class. I know American law professors have come to Canada, looked at it and said, this is amazing. Why aren't we all doing it this way? Right? So yes, it can be done as part of our institutional process of developing lawyers, but you can do this in law school. You could do this before you start law school. You can do this anytime you want, and it gives you exposure to being a lawyer that you wouldn't have had before. Is it perfect? No. Is it fully developed? No. But it's a whole lot better than nothing, and nothing is the option on hand for us right now.
So you brought up the idea of reconfiguration of how lawyers do what they do. Mm-hmm. Right now, with respect to law students and how we educate them. Mm-hmm. But more broadly, for lawyers, how do you anticipate that they might reconfigure the way that they practice law because of AI? And I know it's a big question and hard to get into the weeds with exact examples because we just may not know yet where that's leading, but are there some ideas that you have?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest way to get a sense of my thoughts here, I did a piece last week on my Substack called Advocate, Advise, and Accompany. And that's where I kind of set up my vision of, just for fun, let's assume that generative AI actually hits something like 70 to 80% of its potential, and it accelerates so much legal work and is able to automate so much legal work that 80% of the inventory of lawyers, all the billable time stuff we've been doing for the longest time, the low to medium level stuff where we punch below our weight on things, that's gone. Something else is doing that. What's left for us to do? What is beyond the reach of even generative AI in its highest form. And said the things that I think fundamentally have always been the core of our value. We advocate for people, we advise our clients, and we accompany them on their journeys wherever they're going from point A to point B. I mean, their journey may be from point A to point X, and we just happen to be with them during J to L. That's fine. For however long we're with them, we're accompanying them on their way to give them that insight and that sounding board and that sense of someone else is with me on this. That I think has always been the core value of lawyers. I wrote a piece ages ago saying the real value lawyers provide to their clients is peace of mind. Because if you've got a lawyer you trust working on it, then the thing that has been hanging over you, the dark cloud or the monkey on your back that's been haranguing you for days or weeks or months, someone else is taking care of it and you can get on with your life, right? And that is a real value that lawyers provide. And so for me, one of the things generative AI can do is clear a lot of that other stuff off our place to say, now we can focus on the stuff. And hey, you know what? This is more interesting. This is more fulfilling. This is more valuable. I can charge more for this. And I can charge in a way that does not depend on the number of hours that I practice or the number of hours that I docket, but in terms of the outcomes I provide for people. And I come back again to my original, my founding thought, which is generating positive outcomes for people is kind of the point of the legal profession. This is why we exist. So generative AI has that potential to help clear off the plate for us. It's also helpful because it's as you know, it's a tremendous, not just a tool, but it's an assistant. It's an intern. It's a sounding board. It's your own companion in a way, someone that you can bounce ideas off and use to be a bit of a creativity engine. And how can I explore this and so forth? And that's just what we can see less than a year into it. I don't know how much farther it's going to go. I'm not a full scale. What's the term? The singularity. I'm not a singularity believer. No offense to those who are. I think this is going to go a long way. I don't think it's going to go all the way to original series Star Trek. But even as far as it goes, I think it's going to have a significant impact on us. My fundamental point here, coming in for landing on all this, is if we use it properly, then it should allow us to bring more of ourselves to our work, to be more human, not less, because the human stuff is what's actually left for us. And the human stuff at the end of the day is what really leaves an impact with our clients and leaves an impact on people.
Again, I sound like a broken record, but I completely agree. I think we see eye to eye on a lot of these things. And the human complexity, the need for that bond of helping someone through something, of being a guide, of having been there many times before and being a trusted resource.
Yes.
That's really the critical need I think that people have when they're in a bind and they need help.
I give presentations like frequently to law firms. And there's always the older partners and the corner partners and the ones who look like, grizzled, wildebeest. And the extent that I'm able to make connections with them, it is on this very point. What is it your clients really value about you? About you as a person? It is, you're really good at, you might be a great trial lawyer, you might be a great negotiator, but in this city I'm standing in, I can throw a stone and hit 10 or 50 or 100 good trial lawyers, good negotiators per se, but I can't find anybody else like you. You're the only one out there who is you, who has your mix of gifts, your mix of talents and approaches and perspectives and beliefs, and you are the actual value you are bringing to your client. It is irreplaceable. It is literally, nobody can compete with you on this. So why don't you just push, dive in, go all in, man, go all in on what makes you absolutely irreplaceable and uncompetable with. And if the Gen-I comes in here and takes a lot of the other crap out of the way, that's getting between you as a person and your client, I think that should be one of your top priorities.
And it's kind of funny because it seems counterintuitive that as a business concept, we're taught that, being so personally involved that you get hit by a bus, the whole business dies, is not the way to go.
Yeah.
But in this situation where AI manages and takes care of pretty much everything else, then that's your business. Your business is you, right?
Yeah, I think it is. Now, that is not to say, of course, obviously you build in all kinds of, you're still delivering those kinds of services, but they are automated, right? They're working in a technological fashion, right? And the idea that technology is doing your work for you should not be news to anybody who's ever used a photocopier or used an email. So would you rather, take copy out by hand these documents? Would you rather walk over and give the message to the person? No, you use a technology. It just happens to be the technology that was around when you were born, or that when you arrived in the profession, or what have you. It is, the difference between something like staggeringly, frighteningly bizarre technology and normal stuff depends entirely on how old you are and when you first encountered it. So yeah, I mean, so you still build in all of those fail safes. And of course, if you are solo or at a very small firm, you have obligations in terms of business continuity. And like every law society in Canada and every state bar has rules and regulations around that. So of course, you build in fail safes for yourself as a business provider and as a business owner. But in terms of the value you are providing, in a lot of ways, the work that you do, the actual deliverables themselves, that's just the raw material, that's just the things you're working with in order to deliver the outcome. But the outcome is what the client needs, and the experience of getting the outcome is what the client remembers. That is golden rule number one, as far as I'm concerned, for running a law firm of any kind.
Yeah, and as we've heard so many times before, it's not about somebody wanting to buy the nails or the hammer, but it's about
Mhm.
hanging the piece of art on your wall
Yeah.
that is the result that they're all looking for.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And you need the skills to do that. Don't get me wrong, right? You need to know what you're doing. And it gets being back to lawyer formation, understanding what are the skills and competencies of a lawyer going forward. That's an open question. We don't know that right now. We're going to find out, I think, fairly soon. But it does come back to this idea that find the tools that will allow you to do the best with the raw material, and good things are going to come flowing from that.
so along those lines, you had mentioned the importance of experimenting with AI. Do
Mhm.
you do you have any practical tips for how lawyers should do that?
Oh yeah, well, it's at the moment it's easy, right? You can go Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, right? They're online, available to you, pretty much for free, as far as I can tell, unless something has changed recently. Or even if you were to get something to spend a little more money on it, like OpenAI's Chat GPT 4.0 or 4. Whatever we're at right now. $20 a month. I have $20 US a month. I have a subscription to that service. It's like I would pay a lot more. Well, don't tell OpenAI that. I would pay a lot more than $20 a month to get access to this. That's nothing, right? That's less than any lawyer who's listening to this spends on coffee or tea over the course of a month. So there is no barrier to using this kind of thing. And then honestly, the thing to do with it is try it out and literally experiment, see what it can do. If you ask it to run multiplication and division and algebra, it will fail miserably. If you ask it to give me 5 cases or 5 academic articles that prove my point, it will fail catastrophically, as we have already seen in a number of cases at this point. Given a couple of years from now, we'll see where things are at. But in terms of being that role player, in terms of generating ideas for cross examinations, or generating options for clients to consider to help grow their business, or risks that the client should be considering, given the fact that the client runs a small business in this town with this kind of customers, with this kind of environment. Take all of the information that's available out in the world in your system and tell me what are 8 risks the client is not seeing right now, probably, and how I, as a lawyer, can help to prepare them for that kind of a thing, and just see what it can do, and then keep trying it, kicking back and forth on it. The fundamental take for me on generative AI, Tom, and again, I'll be interested in your take on this because you are an expert, whereas I am not. But I made this observation to someone the other day. Virtually every invention we have in the world today was invented to do something, right? I need a way to get a hammer into that piece of wood without making my fist a bloody pulp. Oh, a hammer. There is an idea. Works so much better, right? You're trying to achieve something. There's a point to it. There's a goal. I want to be able to do X. I don't think generative AI fits that description. I don't think it was invented to do something. I think it was invented to be something. And I don't even think people who invented it know exactly what they meant it to be. And that might be unprecedented. I can't think of another invention that we've got that was developed not because we need to solve X, Y, Z, or whatever, not because they need to achieve something, but hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? What if this, let's pull all this together and see what it can do. We think it could be able to do this. It could be a super brain, it could be Skynet, it could be all sorts of exciting things, but let's see what it is. And the reason that's relevant is that you as a lawyer sitting down with this program, this little, weirdly human, but although not human, intern on your desktop, asking it to do stuff, you are figuring out what it can do. You'll be the first person in a lot of ways, maybe, to figure out what it can do. One of the reasons why within law firms, I recommend not only do you all get everybody, not just the lawyers, oh my God, not just the lawyers, get everybody experimenting with this thing, and then get together and share what you experienced. Hey, I tried this, massive laughable failure. I tried this, was actually kind of cool. Well, I tried this, da, da, da. And share your learnings, because we're all doing that collectively with this. We don't know what it can do. I cannot emphasize how important and how mind-blowing that is. We don't know what it can do, but we're finding out. And if that doesn't turn your crank, I think there's something wrong with you.
And we don't know what it could do now,
Yeah.
let alone tomorrow or 15 minutes from now.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan Mollick, right, who writes about this work extensively, and he's very fond of saying, if generative AI development stopped dead tomorrow, if we never got any further than GPT 4 point whatever and Gemini 1.5, if nothing happened again, we would be years figuring out all the uses and all the applications, but it's not ending tomorrow. And we don't know where it will end. Again, I think it'll have an endpoint. I think we will run up against a wall at some point, well short of 100% of its what the imagination suggests to it that it can do. But I don't know how far short of 100 it's going to go. So yeah, I mean, again, it's an undiscovered country, if I can be Shakespearean for a moment. Of course, the undiscovered country is death. So maybe I shouldn't use that as a.
Let's not go there.
Maybe that'll give too much helium to the people who are warning, and not to say this is not without peril, right? Obviously, again, when you really don't know what it can do a lot of crazy stuff. Like when I first saw the videos, the AI videos that OpenAI rolled out, I said, okay, hang on, who asked for this? How does this make the world any better? How is this going to make the elections in 70 countries around the world this year any better than it was beforehand, right? Okay, I love what you're doing with the LLMs. I love this. This is an agent of chaos, right? And if you talk about an irresponsible development, I think that one qualifies. But that's the problem, right? Every technology is going to have good and bad uses, and you can't have one without the other, much as I wish we could.
Well, you had asked what I thought about that, and my view of AI is a little more like it's a natural resource, right? It's less like a specific tool, and it's more more like wood. Okay, like we could take wood, we can make a fire out of it, we could build a house with it, we can make the handle on a hammer with it, and it's AI is malleable in the same exact way. It's more left to what our goal is.
Yeah, that's true.
But the fact that the wood is actually like evolving over time and getting better at helping us use it is quite different.
Yeah, no, the wood it's becoming metal, then it's becoming plastic, and it's becoming something we don't know yet what it is. So again, my enthusiasm bubbles over sometimes in terms, because I see the potential for all the good it can do, but I am not blind to the potential downsides. And and I think it makes sense for us to have, if we're not driving with a foot on the brake, we should at least have our foot hovering over the brake and with a very close eye on the road in front of us. It would be irresponsible for us not to do that. But either way, we got to be scanning the road ahead of us to see what's coming up.
So I definitely want to ask you about that, but before I do, I'd like to paint a picture of what the costs are of inaction, because I think of course I'm on the same page about being enthusiastic about this, but I think some lawyers stand by the sideline or on the fence, whatever metaphor we want to use, because they don't really factor in what the cost is of inaction. Do you think there is a cost of inaction? What is that?
Oh yeah. Any time a new development arrives in the sector in which you're working, well, in this case, it arrives in every sector. I mean, unless you're, down the street putting up a high-rise building with your hands and steel girders, in that line of work, or an electrician, yeah, this is going to affect the kind of work that you're living in. It's going to change knowledge work. It's going to change what we probably still call white-collar work, and I think it's going to change it permanently. So, to be willfully blind to that, or to be complacent in the face of it, I think is deeply unwise. Number one, because you will be largely unprepared for the sharp turns in the road that are coming up, and you could just keep going straight where the road no longer exists because it went over this way. But in the broader sense, you also miss out on the opportunity to contribute to it, to help shape it. This is a point I made in a conversation earlier today. We have a bit of a learned helplessness here in this profession of ours. We sort of say, yeah, we know it's not perfect, we know it's not great, but what are you going to do? It's just the way things are. And it's like, no, that's not good enough for anybody. It sure isn't good enough for the people who have been given regulatory authority and governance of this entire sector to say, meh, what are you going to do? Right? So same thing with AI. It's like, I totally get it. People are skeptical about AI. It's like, great, totally buy that. How much have you used it? What have you used it for? Where do you think the opportunities lie? Where do you think the dangers lie? Because those are very reasonable conversations to be having. But to stand on the sidelines altogether, to me, just feels, it feels kind of irresponsible, but it also feels, I hesitate to use a judgmental word like this, but it feels kind of arrogant, to say this can't possibly affect me. And it's like, okay, you know what? If the only thing you do is argue appellate cases in front of the highest Supreme Court in your jurisdiction, then okay, yeah. If you're a pure barrister, yeah, maybe I'll buy it. But for anybody else, I don't think you can have that level of complacency. And the opposite of judgmentalism, as Ted Lasso, Walter Whitman via Ted Lasso helped us to understand, be curious, not judgmental. My message to lawyers is be curious about generative AI. Don't be judgmental, because the more curious you are, the more you will learn, and the better you're going to be equipped to deal with whatever happens to come our way at the end of it.
Well, I'm a big fan of Ted Lasso, and that's a great takeaway for this. Also, Walt Whitman. So talking about the dangers, right? There's a number of ethical implications. And there's been a lot of talk about what those are, but what do you think are the more important ones, the more salient ones that lawyers should really be worried about, and how do they deal with it?
It's a really interesting question. And it's funny because I got a call from a reporter from a US legal magazine a few days ago. And one of the things they asked me was, what do you think about the ethical implications of AI, such as with that case in New York? And I said, that was not a case about ethics. That was a case about competence. This was someone who asked used a completely untested technology with which he clearly had no familiarity, to create material which he then gave unreviewed to a court. That is not an ethical failing unless you consider it to be the failing of the ethical duty to be competent. And quite frankly, everything lawyers do, every mistake lawyers make is in that regard an ethical issue, but I don't think that that's actually correct. So I think to describe the stupid use of AI and the stupid use of any tool, whether it's email, whether it's anything, as an ethical violation, I think mischaracterizes the fundamental issue. There aren't that many core ethical issues for lawyers. I mean, despite what the code of conduct may make you believe, what are the fundamental ethical, the absolute ironclad foundation ones? Solicitor-client confidentiality, conflicts of interest. Now, of course, I have the list here at the top of my head, but I can't pull the other. There's two others which are critical to the whole thing. This is so stupid, and I'm blanking on it, but I know what they are, and you know what they are. They're the ones that are the core of our duties, specifically as lawyers, right? Like, to be competent is something that every single professional has in common. It is not specific to law, but there are certain things like mixing trust accounts. How many stupid decisions are made by lawyers and to get themselves in trouble and get themselves disbarred because they mix their own funds with the client trust funds, that kind of thing, right? Those are ethical failures. But even then, sorry, this is a 1 minute soapbox for me. An ethical failing is not the same as a moral failing. I get this all the time, right? People say the number one ethical issue is lawyers fail to communicate with their clients. I said, no, that is a practice issue. That is a training issue. That is a lawyer who's got 80 people hammering at them all day long saying, I need this, I need that. Where's this? Where's that? Running their own business. If you've got solos and small firm lawyers listening to that, you know exactly what this is like. You're in charge of everything. Everybody wants a piece of you immediately. And it's just too much. It's overwhelming. It is, and you are knocked flat by this, and things are gonna fall through the cracks because you're being burdened with too much at one time. So yeah, you're not gonna return that call, not because you don't care, not because you are dismissive of your client, but because you can only juggle 99 balls before the 100th one falls to the side. Okay, so in that context, what do we mean about the ethical implications of AI? I think we draw the camera back and say, the fundamental ethical rule for the lawyer is you are there to serve your client, to help to serve your client's interests, okay? And by saying that, I'm not saying that you put the client's interest ahead of everything, right? Because the wellness crisis in the law tells us enough about how that's wrong. I'm not talking about negating yourself as a professional, but I'm saying that is your fundamental duty, is to serve the client's interest as if they were your own. Spend the client's money as if it was your own. Make decisions or make recommendations for the client as if you were the one to implement them, right? And in that context, how does AI come into this? It is an extraordinary tool that has a lot of potential for good, has a certain potential for destructiveness, and has to be gauged in that way. But I think one of the things you do is you tell your client about it. Hey, have you heard about this new generative AI? I'm learning about it as well. I'm fiddling with some things. Hey, do you want to spend an hour and a half one day, no charge, just sitting with me and thinking about ways we could use this for your life or for your business or for this? We can do it over Zoom, or we can do it in my office, or I can come to your home. We can do whatever you like, right? But you are incorporating it into the relationship with your client. And if you're doing that, you are using generative AI in an ethical manner. The ethics themselves fundamentally don't change according to whatever the new technology happens to be. At the end of the day, it comes down to your judgment, comes down to your character, comes down to the decisions and choices that you make. And if they're not made with your client in mind, you're doing it wrong.
Definitely. All of these court rules that are coming out, or local rules where the judges are saying that you need to disclose using AI, or you have to give me a list of all the cases.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, I don't think that's needed. I think that, in the States, Rule 11 in federal civil procedure, that's sufficient to make you own what you file with the court and be responsible for it. So having these tacked on additional local rules are really not necessary.
Yeah,
And,
I agree. I mean, it can't hurt to send out a warning as a court to say, hey, as you've probably seen from our friend in New York who did us all a solid to his own great detriment. You've seen and heard about the problems that generative AI has created. What we can advise you is it is absolutely not a good idea, deeply inadvisable to do what he did, to use ChatGPT for anything that is submitted to us as a court or used as a legal point, right? Lots of other ways you can use it, and there's resources out there you can find out about, but just to give you the heads up, this is happening, and protect yourself, protect your client's interests, protect our interests, and be aware of that. You don't have to make it a rule. You don't have to make yet another freaking burden on lawyers. Oh my God, I got to file something else with the court, right? Just advise them. As I'm fond of saying, they're adults. They can figure it out. And if they can't figure it out, if they still, even after having been advised by the court directly, don't do this, if they do it then my sympathy levels go considerably down.
Well, look, you're prolific in your writing, and how do you stay up to date on the developments in law and technology, especially considering the fact that they've been coming, wave after wave after wave? Are there any
Yeah.
resources you would recommend to anyone?
Oh, well, the resource I would recommend most is finding a way to clone yourself 5 or 6 times because I could use that. Um, yeah, it's like a fire hose. It really is. And I can't. I mean, I subscribe to a bunch of Substacks, including yours, Tom. I try to. I'm on Twitter still, stubbornly on Twitter, and I have a number of friends who've left it on principle, and I totally get that. My thing is, I was there before he arrived. I intend to be there after he's gone. I'm not giving him the satisfaction of bailing on it, and I still get some value out of it. I just curate my feed very carefully. So if you're interested, I mean, you can go to my Twitter account, look under my following. I follow like 200 accounts maximum, you know, and some of them are just for fun. So you can probably find a sense of the people that I'm listening to, and I just dip into that river with some frequency. I read the Substacks. Eden Moloch is a great resource outside of the law. You know what? I could add 10 or 15 more. Just don't have the time because AI isn't, despite the fact I've been yapping about it for like an hour, it isn't even the thing I do most. It isn't even the area that I'm actually the most interested in. I am deeply interested in lawyer formation. I am deeply interested in access to a working legal system. I'm deeply interested in the lives of lawyers and the service they provide to clients. AI is fascinating. I think it has the potential to unlock a lot of doors that we didn't know existed before. But I also don't want us to take our eyes off the ball to say it's this the game here, the point here is still serve your clients, be a responsible, ethical professional, make things better. It's and it sounds like a childish directive, but I speak to law schools and law students fairly frequently, and I said, you're being told right now that all the great visionary it's aspirational things about being a lawyer and this and that and so forth, and you're going to get into practice and a Mack truck's going to hit you, and you're going to think, oh, was all of it just crap? Was all that talk about the aspiration, the profession, the higher duties, was that just nonsense? I'm like, no, it wasn't, and it isn't. And you got to keep on believing that. You got to believe in that for yourself. You got to believe in that for the work that you do. So that to me is also a fundamental plank of everything we're doing here.
I think it's interesting that what you do actually is an example of an alternative career within the legal profession. And for anyone who might be listening or watching this, do you have any suggestions to them if they want to do what you're doing? Like, what is a way that they can do that or pursue it? Um, what recommendations do you have for them?
Wow. First of all, the fact that I got here completely by accident and by good fortune and by guiding hand is the first thing. And I think that probably describes most people at any point in their careers. I like to say I look back on the path I took to get here, and it makes no sense whatsoever. There's no direction or rhyme or reason, but I also feel like I couldn't have wound up anywhere else. If I wound up where I'm supposed to be. Um, when I do talk to law schools, and this comes up all the time when I'm talking to law schools, is often the first question I get from the students is like, tell us about the alternative legal career. And I said, well, first of all, the first word you need to drop here is alternative, because it suggests that there's a default. It suggests that there's a proper legal career. And that proper legal career, it has been strongly suggested to you by the architecture and apparatus of the legal sector and the profession, is that the proper legal career is you are working in an office as a private practice lawyer for multiple clients, ideally in a small bedroom community somewhere with a white picket fence, and you are fulfilling that particular role. And that is not the default setting. More lawyers do not answer to that description than do. So never mind alternative, okay? It's a legal career, and it is a career in the law doing something, right? But there's no one career is better or worse than the other. And I said, and you know what? For what it's worth, I would recommend the second adjective you drop is legal, because you're going to have a career. You're going to have multiple careers, right? I'm an old dude. I'm 56. I've only had two, which is really unusual, right? I was a trade periodical editor for the legal profession, and now I'm doing whatever it is I do for the last 15 years. right? You folks are going to have several. You're going to go all sorts of different places, right? And do different things. And the law may or may not be one of the central hubs around which your work is centered. But even if it's not, if you go somewhere completely different, the law will never entirely leave you as a resource and a launching point and a reference point for the things that you do. But don't worry if you're not having a legal career. Are you having a life? Are you alive? Are you forming good relationships? Then that's a really good start. And the career thing comes in due course. I don't know the old line, right? Life is what happens when you're making other plans. A career is what happens when you're just getting through life and figuring out what to do next, right? And if you are lucky enough, as I and have been incredibly fortunate to find something to do where your passions and your skills and your talents also somehow overlap with a market opportunity where people are actually interested in paying you for the kind of work that you're doing to a greater or lesser extent. And lesser is fine, right? I'm fond of saying my law school classmates are making, the ones who went to bigger firms especially, are making multiples of what I make every year, but that's okay, right? So it's a question of where does your career fit into your life? So don't think about work-life balance because it suggests that your work and your life are two sides of the same coin. Your life is, if I may be poetic for a moment, your life is a jewel and it has lots of different facets. And the work that you are engaged in for remuneration is one of those facets. It's an important one, keeps a roof over your head. It gives you a lot of value. What I do gives me a lot of personal value, but it's just one thing. Don't get hung up on whether it's alternative or whether it's legal.
Which leads me to my next question, and forgive me if I get a little personal with these last two questions, but I like to ask them of
Okay.
all the guests that I have
All right.
on the show.
I'm prepared. Okay.
But what makes it all worthwhile for you? Like tying that all together,
Ooh,
what makes it worthwhile?
ooh, that's yeah. So you saved one good one for last. I guess I've been talking about it through this whole thing about being useful. My wife likes to make fun of me in a very gentle way, but she'll kind of call me Thomas the Tank Engine because I'm always like I want to be a really useful engine, you know. And I'm always like going forward. But yeah, I mean, I'm on this earth to serve, right? That is a personal belief. It's a spiritual, religious belief. It is a cultural belief. I'm here to help, right? We're all here to help in some way. Yeah, I remember the great line from Sugar Ray Leonard, the boxer, who was giving a commencement speech one time. And he said, you got to pursue your talents. We've all been blessed with God-given talents. Mine just happens to be beating people up. and, and I love that, right? Because you know what? That actually was the thing he was turned to be really good at. Um, but in my case, like I just figure uh, I'm extremely fortunate to have had, I'm in a position where I have an angle or a view of the legal market that very few other lawyers have because they're out there doing stuff for their clients and making a living and providing for their families and doing all the stuff they need to do. And if what I can do in terms of speaking and talking and writing and having conversations like this helps to give that sense of perspective and that whatever insights I can muster to bring forward. And if lawyers' lives are better, if lawyers' practices make more sense and are more productive and are more effective and efficient, and if the clients they serve are happier and more effective, and more people have access to legal services, that's the point, right? That's the whole point of being here. And that's the whole point of me being here, as far as I'm concerned.
Last one. What is your best childhood memory?
Oof. Gosh, how much time do we have? You know what? I got a lot, and that speaks to being. I said fortunate a lot. I'm going to say it one last time. I'm very fortunate. Had two loving parents and a very loving family, and I'm the youngest by far of my family, and so I was raised in a very good environment, and a lot of people don't have access to that. So I've got a lot of gratitude for that. Oh gosh, you know what? We had, being the youngest of four, one of the and any youngest siblings, youngest child out there will probably appreciate. By the time you're kind of aware of what's going on, you're like your siblings have left, right? They've gone off to college or they've gone off to work and so forth, and it's just you and your parents, and that has a dynamic all its own. But there was one, I think it wasn't even Christmas. It was like sometime in the summer, but it just happened. All my siblings, and two of them are married at that point, happened to be back home where I was living at the time. And it was the first time in years we'd all been together. And just to be able to kind of recapture that sense of the intense familial, the bond and the love that was there, really that one leaps out just in terms of one particular thing. And again, that's something that I'm very fortunate and grateful for. um but but it's also for me about, all right, so having had those advantages, what can I do to help as many other people as I can get those advantages? And I'm not a family law person, I'm not a family person. What I do has nothing to do with those sorts of life quality issues. But none of us got here on our own, right? None of us got here through our own, entirely our own efforts. And so a lot of what I do, if I could create for my kids that kind of environment and that kind of experience, and if I can, as I try to do in this profession, talk to as many people as I can and give whatever insights or suggestions as I can, then I have been a really useful engine, and I and I've done what I was put here to do.
Well, I think that's a great one to end on, being a useful engine.
Yeah.
Engine for good.
Yes, that's also, let's not be Gordon out there, okay? Let's not be a Diesel. Let's stay on the right track here.
So how can people keep in touch with you and learn more?
Well, like I say, I'm still frequently on Twitter, so you can track me down there. Not many Jordan Furlongs, as you might imagine. Substack, I'm publishing every week, 1 or 2 weeks there. That's the easiest thing. I'm on LinkedIn, although I don't tend to use it as, again, only so many places you can be at one given time. But find me on Twitter, find me on Substack. That's the most current stuff from me. Yeah, and that's probably the best way to run me down.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. I know that I've learned a ton from you, got to know you a little bit more personally, and yeah, we have a lot on our hands with AI in the legal profession. It's gonna be interesting how it plays out over the next few years.
Yeah, it really is. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciated the chance to speak with you today. Take good care.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.